It's October 5th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with South Korea's men's football team's win at the semis. The Korean squad is one step closer to snatching their third straight gold medal after beating Uzbekistan. The Tag Warriors will face Japan on Saturday in the gold medal match. And Japan will start releasing the second batch of Fukushima wastewater in the coming hour. The Tokyo Electric Power Company is confident that all is safe and good to go. The 2030 World Cup will mainly take place in Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. The global event will see games played in 6 countries across 3 continents to mark a 100-year anniversary of the first edition. The second round of Fukushima wastewater release by Japan will begin at 10:30 this morning, which is less than 2 hours from now. And again, South Korea is also sending its own team of experts to the site for monitoring. Our Bae-eun-ji reports.
Despite protests from neighboring countries, including South Korea and China, Japan plans to start the discharge of a second batch of Fukushima wastewater into the sea on Thursday. Just like the first batch, a total of about 7,800 tons of water will be heading into the Pacific Ocean. The process will take 17 days, meaning around 460 tons a day will be released. To address concerns, the South Korean government announced Wednesday that it'll dispatch another team of experts from the Korea Institute of Nuclear Safety to Fukushima to monitor the release process. But it did not give further details, including when they will depart or how long they will stay in Japan. This will be the third time that South Korea is sending its own experts to Fukushima, after the 2 countries earlier agreed to have Korean experts regularly visit the IAEA field office there.
Just like the previous 2 dispatches, the team will visit the IAEA field office, as well as the facilities in the plant, and hold video conferences with the IAEA. It'll focus on making sure that the second batch is discharged properly, as originally planned by the Tokyo Electric Power Company.
If all goes as planned, Japan will be discharging 2% of the wastewater stored in the Fukushima power plant by March next year. A total of 1.34 million tons of water, enough to fill 500 Olympic-sized swimming pools, will be discharged over the next 30 years. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea last week set in stone its expansion of nuclear forces in its constitution. And South Korea's military says the North will face the end of the regime should it use nuclear weapons. Choi Min-jung reports.
Seoul's defense ministry has warned that should North Korea use its nuclear weapons, this would bring about the end of its regime. Wednesday's warning comes after Pyongyang last week enshrined its status as a nuclear power in its constitution. The ministry said South Korea's military possesses a joint Seoul-Washington readiness posture that can overwhelmingly respond to any attack from North Korea. It added such threats to peace and stability will further isolate North Korea from the international community and worsen the suffering of its people. Pyongyang's constitutional amendment stated its ambition to advance its nuclear capabilities, reinforcing that denuclearization is not up for discussion. In fact, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed to accelerate nuclear weapons production to deter, quote, U.S. provocations. The regime's state-run media reported on Wednesday that North Korea's defense ministry criticized the U.S. for describing the North as a persistent threat on its new strategy on countering weapons of mass destruction. It added that the world's biggest threat from weapons of mass destruction comes from none other than the U.S. The ministry accused Washington of increasing nuclear threats, referring to the joint military drills with South Korea and the deployment of its strategic nuclear submarine near the Korean peninsula. On that note, the North Korean military pledged to counter the U.S. military tactics with the most overwhelming and sustained response strategy. Though such a response from the North is not unusual, the latest exchanges come as there are growing concerns that North Korea and Russia are pushing for an arms deal. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Revitalizing the local economy and stabilizing people's livelihoods. That's on top of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's to-do list for the 4th quarter. Now, let's discuss more with Professor Kim Se-won this morning. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Kim, so making people's lives better, meaning more affordable in terms of the cost of living, but the cost of living here in South Korea appears to be, far from being tamed, especially with the price of milk. The price has gone up, so-called being referred to as milkflation. Now, same goes for ice cream and pastries. Why is that?
Actually, the overall price level measured by Consumer Price Index is pretty much stabilized compared to that of last year. But recently, oil price and some agricultural products prices are rising quickly, and inflation pressure gets stronger. The inflation, which is the annual growth of Consumer Price Index, increased up to 6.3% July last year, but that decreased down to 2.3% in July this year. But inflation picks up again from August with 3.4% inflation, and just released last month's inflation in September was even higher with 3.7%. Particularly the price of the milk, yogurt, and other dairy products sold by Korea's largest milk seller will increase by up to 28%, which is almost 30% at convenience stores starting in October. That sparked concerns about the potential inflationary effects within dairy market. Smaller production and higher logistics costs are reasons for higher milk price.
And it's not just what we eat. The subway fee here in the metropolitan area will also go up starting this Saturday, now for the first time in 8 years. Now, how big is the increase, and can we expect further hikes before the end of the year?
Previously, we remember that there was a bus fare hike in August, and then the basic subway fare in Seoul metro area is supposed to rise up to 1,400 won from current 1,250 won this Saturday. It is a 12% rise in the single shot, which is big increase. Recently, the Seoul subway fee hike has been only a matter of time because Seoul's subway system suffered annual losses of 920 billion won on average from 2018. The hike is the first in 8 years, as you said, since June 2015, and it will affect those using the subway system, including myself, in Greater Seoul. And that also affects the Gyeonggi province and Incheon province people's living cost. But those aged 5 or younger or 65 or older may travel through the subway system free of charge after fare hike plan.
Right, the government has a long pledge to stabilize people's livelihoods, but the dairy products are going up, especially eggs and milk that we eat on a daily basis, and plus public transportation fees going up too. Now, how can the government actually work to tame the pricey cost of living?
That is a tough question. But Korean inflation is much affected by foreign factors like international oil price, the war in Ukraine, and agricultural harvest in other countries like Australia and Brazil. All these are supply-side factors, which is not much controlled by Korean government. But Bank of Korea can stabilize the inflation by decreasing demand through raising its key interest rate, which is 3.5% as of now. But higher interest rate is likely to worsen economic growth by hurting people's income and employment. So we can say that Korean government is under a squeezed situation between inflation and economic growth.
Right, quite a tough situation there. Now, we're well into the last quarter of 2023. Can't believe we just have less than 3 months until the new year comes. But the country is still aiming for that 1.4 economic growth this year. Now, to do that, exports need to go up. How achievable is this goal considering the export situation at the moment?
Korean export fell for the 12th consecutive month in September, but the trade balance posted a $3.7 billion last month. It is the fourth straight month trade surplus for Korean economy. However, the export of semiconductor and export to China is not fully recovered yet against last year. Even with weaker export, Korean economy is expected to grow 1.4% this year because Korean export decline is expected to be limited by the recovery in global demands for chips from other nations and slow recovery of domestic spending and domestic investment.
Right, but in the meantime, there are still great uncertainties that, considering the country's heavy trade dependency and also, like you mentioned, soaring global energy prices, right?
That's true. There are lots of uncertainties ahead of Korean export and import for this year. It should be noted that one of the largest concerns are oil price. Dubai oil price is moving around $90 per barrel, which is much higher than before the COVID pandemic at $60 per barrel. Also, there is less possibility of oil price drop because oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia are controlling production for raising oil price. As we talked about, because imports decline more than exports, Korean economy maintains trade surplus as of now, but higher oil price can make trade deficit by raising import price higher.
Right. It looks like that issue will linger considering Saudi did announce that the production cuts will remain in place until the end of the year. All right, Professor Kim Se-wan, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Global oil prices sank more than 5% on Wednesday, marking the biggest single-day drop in more than a year. Now, Brent crude fell 5.6% to settle at $85.81 a barrel, the sharpest decline since August 2022. Wednesday's decline comes after Brent crude approached the $100 per barrel mark just last week. And the West Texas Intermediate also fell 5.6% on the day to $84.22, its biggest fall since September 2022. Watchers say expectations that demand for crude oil will decrease due to the economic slowdown have pushed oil prices down sharply. And the Saudi Energy Ministry announced on Wednesday that production cuts would continue until the end of the year. 2 Americans and a Russian scientist have won this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry, thanks to their discovery and synthesis of quantum dots. But the winners were announced early in a rare slip-up. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced Wednesday that 2 Americans and a Russian scientist jointly won this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their discovery and synthesis of quantum dots.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2023 Nobel Prize in Chemistry in equal shares to Monje Bavendi, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, USA; Louise Bruce, Columbia University, USA; and Alexei Yekimov, Nanocrystals Technology Incorporated, USA, for the discovery and synthesis of quantum dots.
The 3 U.S.-based Nobel Prize laureates took the prize for their work with quantum dots, or tiny particles that are just a few atoms in diameter and whose electrons have constrained movement. Their work showed how they absorb and release visible light, allowing for very bright colors, ultimately contributing to numerous applications ranging from QLED screens to imaging in biochemistry, medicine, and much more. The dots emit different colors depending on their size, with larger dots shining red and smaller dots shining blue. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences also noted that the work with quantum dots will also allow for surgeons to find tumors more precisely, as the particles catalyze chemical reactions and their clear light can illuminate tumor tissue. The announcement of the winners was, however, leaked prematurely. Sweden's public broadcaster SVT said the Academy sent a press release by mistake early Wednesday that contained the names of the winners. The Academy says it's still unknown why the press release was sent early and expressed regret over the matter. Meanwhile, the three scientists share not only the top honors for their contribution to science, but also $990,000 in prize money. Woo Sang-hyeok, Arirang News.
The 2030 FIFA World Cup will be quite different from previous World Cups in that it'll have games played across 3 continents for the first time as the tournament celebrates its 100th anniversary. Our An Sung-jin brings more.
The 2030 Men's Football World Cup will see games played in 6 countries across 3 continents: Africa, Europe, and South America. FIFA announced on Thursday that Spain, Portugal, and Morocco will co-host the tournament, while Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay will stage the tournament's 3 opening games to mark 100 years since the first World Cup. Morocco and Portugal will take on hosting duties in the global tournament for the first time, while Spain last hosted in 1982.
With the African Cup of Nations and then the World Cup 2030 in Morocco, the country will prosper and more tourists and national teams from different countries will meet in Morocco.
It has been a discreet, constant, and hard work. It's a work of many months and years. Now we have an important task ahead of us, which is to meet the goals requested by FIFA.
It is the first time the World Cup will have games played across 3 continents. Uruguay especially holds significance in that the country hosted the inaugural World Cup final in 2030. FIFA President Gianni Infantino said the World Cup would unite the world while celebrating together the beautiful game.
In a divided world, FIFA and football are uniting, bringing everyone together, bringing football everywhere.
All 6 host nations automatically qualify for the 48-team tournament. Formal approval is set to be given next year at a meeting of the 211 FIFA member federations. FIFA also opened the bidding to countries wishing to host the World Cup in 2034. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Asia's biggest annual film festival, the Busan International Film Festival, is back for the 28th edition. Now, the curtains went up last night for the 10-day event. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports from Busan.
For this week and next, South Korea's southern port city Busan transforms into a dazzling hub of cinematic celebration. The annual Busan International Film Festival raised its curtains with the opening ceremony on Wednesday. Actors and filmmakers from around the world graced the red carpet at the Busan Cinema Center. So the Busan International Film Festival, BIF as it's also known, is the first international film festival here in Korea and has also become the largest in Asia. Now this year, 209 films from 69 countries have been invited for official screening. This is slightly fewer than last year, mainly due to budget constraints and internal committee issues. But this downsizing did little to dampen the festivities. Korean actor Song Kang-ho, who won the Best Actor award at last year's Cannes Film Festival, welcomed guests at the opening ceremony. Adding to the star-studded lineup was Hong Kong actor Cho Yun-fat, attending to accept the Asian Filmmaker of the Year award. For the first time in BIF history, actress Park Eun-bin took the stage as the sole host for the opening ceremony. The opening film was Because I Hate Korea by Korean filmmaker Chung Han-jae. The audience's excitement was palpable even before the ceremony began.
Because I'm a big fan of Parasite. It was my first Korean movie I saw in France in a theater, and I fell in love with Korean cinema.
I'm a huge fan of Chow Yun-fat's work, and I was really into Hong Kong movies last year. I can't wait to see him in person.
There's a variety of cinematic highlights throughout the 10-day festival. A special program titled Korean Diasporic Cinema will shed light on Korean-American actors, directors, and films such as Minari, Searching, and Past Lives. The inaugural edition of the Asia Contents Awards and Global OTT Awards is scheduled for Sunday. Its predecessor, the Asia Contents Awards, recognized TV and streaming service content only from Asia, but this year it expanded its award coverage worldwide. So, if you're in search of a movie-filled adventure, Busan welcomes you with open arms until October 13th. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Busan.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn our attention to the 19th Asian Games in Hangzhou, China. Now we begin with football, where the South Korea's men's team is 90 minutes away from winning its third straight Asiad gold medal after beating Uzbekistan 2-1 to advance to the final. Now the Taeguk Warriors withdrew the first blood in Wednesday's semi-final with a goal by Stuttgart forward Jong Woo-young in just the first 5 minutes. But Uzbekistan came back to equalize from a free kick 20 minutes later. Now, Jong regained the lead for South Korea just before half-time with what would end up being the winning goal. The second half saw Uzbekistan reduced to 10 men after one player was sent off for a second yellow card. South Korea will come up against Japan in the final on Saturday at 9 p.m. Korea time. Now over to athletics, as South Korean high jumper Woo Sang-hyeok has clinched his second straight silver medal at the Asian Games. Woo jumped 2.33 meters on Wednesday to finish ahead of Japan's Tomohiro Shino, while three-time world champion Mutaz Barshim of Qatar claimed the gold. Woo cleared 2.33 meters on his second attempt, but the 27-year-old failed to get past 2.37 meters. Woo's result comes after a difficult season, battling heel problems and a sinus infection. In archery, South Korea picked up its first gold medal of this year's Asian Games in the recurve mixed team event on Wednesday, beating Japan in the final. Now, Korean duo Im Si-hyun and Lee Woo-seok beat Japan's Satsuki Noda and Takaharu Furukawa by the score of 6-0. It's the Korean duo's first Korea Asiad gold medal. The result marked Korea's second archery medal of the day after So Chae-won and Ju Jae-hoon won silver just a few hours earlier, losing to India in the compound mixed team final. Meanwhile, both gold and silver will be up for grabs on Saturday in an all-Korean final in the women's individual recurve event between Ansan and Im Si-hyun. And finally, in wrestling, South Korea saw its first medal in the discipline after wrestling ace Chung Han-jae won bronze in the 60-kilogram Greco-Roman category. It's the 28-year-old's first Asiad medal. He beat Islamkhon Bakhramov from Uzbekistan in the final by a score of 5-4. Greco-Roman wrestling is one of several forms of amateur competitive wrestling. This style forbids holds below the waist and emphasizes throws. And now for a look at the medal standings and upcoming schedule.
Good morning. After sudden downpours yesterday, the air has gotten even chillier. Seoul is waking up to the chilliest temperatures of the season. Daegwallyeong at about 3 degrees, dropping below the freezing mark on Seoraksan Mountain this morning. Unseasonably cool and blustery day ahead for us. Highs will also be about 4 degrees lower than yesterday. And then tomorrow we are waking up to another chilly morning. Central regions are waking up to sunny skies. Down south, seeing some clouds covering, but southern regions will notice the skies clearing as the day goes on. Seoul gets up to 19 degrees Celsius. Chuncheon, Gwangju at 20 degrees this afternoon. I mean, it was just a month ago we had frequent rain with high humidity and heat in the 30s, but it has already become dry and crisp under sunshine. This time of year can be a roller coaster. Do dress accordingly and take good care of yourself. Temperatures, though, will return to norms this weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day and Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
Welcome.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, there's no way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.
먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Welcome.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, there's no way. Make sure you listen to what I say. say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토 스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's October 5th here in Seoul. I am Shin Yeun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, and Jessica Dain-ha.
Good morning, everyone.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Have you ever had to order more than you actually want just because you had to pay the bare minimum registered on your Starbucks e-gift card? Well, from December, you won't have to do that. Starbucks Korea has decided to return the amount of money left on a single e-gift card to a customer's personal Starbucks membership card. This comes as many consumers found it a burden to buy more than they want just to match the value of the gift card. And we've just come back from the Chuseok holidays, but many Koreans are saying it wasn't long enough. This year, we had a total of 6 days off, including the weekends, and that's why eyes are already on how many rest days we'll get for the next year's Chuseok. As of now, it seems like we'll have one less day, bringing the total to only 5. This has disappointed many working netizens, but in 2025, we may be able to enjoy a total of 10 days, assuming we designate one Friday as a temporary holiday. And last but not least, we're well into the 19th Asian Games held in Hangzhou, China. While Team Korea is sweeping many golds, it hasn't taken full victory over China's constant claims that kimchi is from China. Songsin Women's University professor Seo Kyung-deok recently posted on his Facebook how the Asian Games main media center gave out kimchi while calling it Chinese cabbage. Professor Seo said he filed a complaint to the organizing committee asking for a clear distinction between kimchi and China's pao chai. Now, here's the difference between kimchi and pao chai. Kimchi is a staple of Korean cuisine, usually made with napa cabbage and fermented at a low temperature for days or even weeks. It's considered a national dish using a lot of fermented seafood sauces and spices. Pao chai, on the other hand, is a local dish popular in regions like Sichuan in China with a shorter fermentation process using salt. It sometimes uses cabbage, but also includes many other vegetables and even meat. And it's not the first time we've been reiterating what's ours to China, right, Jessica?
Yes, and every time it's just like these come up, it's a little bit infuriating because, I mean, let's face it, kimchi, it even sounds like Korean.
Right.
And while, there have been many kind of international cuisines that use similar sort of, preparation, the fermentation of the vegetables. For instance, there's sauerkraut. We don't go around calling it white kimchi, do we?
Right.
Like, I understand that there's a similar process of food, and while we enjoy the cuisine as it is, I mean, China has had similar controversy over hanbok as well in terms of our traditional clothing. So I would like to enjoy pao chai as pao chai and kimchi as kimchi.
For sure. And as much as Korea is widening its global presence with its outstanding sports performances and even the Hallyu cultural wave, it's important that it makes it clear to the world what our traditions and distinct cultural products are. And China isn't the only country that we need to make it clear to, though. Recently, YG Entertainment Group's boy group Treasure has been under the scorn for using a map image that didn't include the official Korean islets Dokdo. And Professor Seo Kyung-deok, who also serves as an active ambassador for Dokdo, has claimed this to be YG's way of trying not to step on the toes of Japanese fans, because as you know, Dokdo, though it's strictly Korean territory, it has been under a lot of controversy with Japan because they've long claimed that it's part of their territory.
Right.
So how do you think Korea should better promote what has been historically and factually ours?
It's really frustrating to see this kind of dispute continue, and given the clear historical facts and the fact that, the boy bands group, I think it was a big misjudgment from the company as well, because due to their actions, this has surfaced up again, and everyone's complaining or talking about it. And I think, but from the YG Entertainment standpoint, having 2 Japanese members in the group and their albums topping the Oricon and the Line music charts can be a reason for them, excluding Tokyo Islets to promote their tour of Japan. But however, distorting national history for personal interest doesn't seem moral to me. And as a Korean entertainment company that represents Korea in the global stage, I think political matters should be set aside because they can obviously directly influence a lot of young people in the wrong way. So I think politics should be dealt with by politicians and the government as well, as their views and outlook shape the direction and the position of a country. And they really need to keep in mind that the decisions they make now can directly affect our generation and the next generation.
Absolutely.
And in turn, really change our history or even be forgotten in the worst case.
That is very true. And I think now more than ever, Korea needs to make known to the world what is ours, whether it be cultural products or historical facts. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's now head into our main discussion topic of the day. Since 2007, every October 5th has been designated as World Korean Day. Take a look at the screen to find out what this day is about.
World Korean Day. It's a day dedicated to the 7.5 million overseas Koreans spread across the world. This day aims to commemorate the contributions of and the rich cultural tapestry woven by the overseas Korean community since their grandparents or even great-grandparents first moved out of the country. The Korean diaspora dates back to the early 1900s and has been driven by various historical, political, and economic events. Since then, we've seen these first-generation Korean immigrants build families and are living with third-generation overseas Koreans.
World Korean Day commemorating overseas Koreans from the first generation right through to the third generation of Korean immigrants. So why don't we first look at how many overseas Koreans there are and where most of them are located as of now.
So according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there are about 7.5 million Koreans living in about 180 countries all around the globe representing South Koreans everywhere. So, that's roughly about 1 Korean every 6 to 7 Koreans that are living overseas at the moment. And as you know, we have experienced a lot of K-towns that have been building in these international countries. So the influence of Koreans and, kind of the new history that Koreans have set out in these foreign countries are really starting to grow. And, Korean, migration sort of began in the mid-1800s, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the influence of South Korean culture, they're becoming, real ambassadors for not just cultural, but economical and political representation in all these countries around the globe. So this is a very important day to remind us.
7.5 million overseas Koreans. And where are they mostly located, Q?
I'm sure many of our viewers would have already guessed, but the most number of overseas Koreans are living in the United States, followed by China. But to give you the figures around the world, let's take a look at the screen. There are around 2.78 million Korean immigrants residing in North America, followed by 2.46 million in China. After that, there are 820,000 Koreans living in Japan, and 590,000 in the South Asia Pacific region, and 210,000 in Europe. Now, these numbers continue to grow. They will continue to grow, which is, a positive sign for South Koreans to further spread their global status. But however, at the same time, here right now in Korea, the decline of the domestic population cannot be ignored, as it will affect the future of our country. So
that's a very good point.
Kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, although we're seeing our global presence grow, it does take a toll on our domestic population at the moment with low birth rates, not a lot of people getting married. But why don't we now delve into the history of the Korean diaspora?
Sure. So as I briefly mentioned, the first sort of quote-unquote migration began in the mid-1800s. They were kind of exported as cheap labor to plantations and factories to sort of earn the money to bring back to South Korea. And then around the 1910s, we had the Japanese colonization, which is a very sad part of the history. But this was sort of when we lost the sovereignty of the country. So a lot of the people were forced to either migrate to China or even to Japan. And a lot of of the citizenship of South Koreans were recognized properly. And then came the Korean War, and a lot of the Koreans, the orphans that were resulting from the war, were sort of adopted to many foreign countries, which also accounts for the Korean Americans or Korean foreigners that are living overseas. Then, fortunately, nowadays, I think more people are voluntarily migrating or immigrating to international countries for educational purposes mostly, and for business purposes. And they're really becoming, you know, the representations of South Koreans all over the world at the moment.
And Cheska, you nicely explained the historical events that allowed or caused a lot of Koreans to go overseas. But Kyun, would you like to take a look at the economic events that really pushed them there?
Right. You know, many of the first generations moved abroad to the US, seeking the American dream, and to provide a better life and education for their children. And also in the US and China, they are the main trading partners of South Korea. So it's obvious and natural for Koreans to start a new prosperous life in those two countries, and for big businesses to, you know, expand their businesses in these two countries. But as for Europe and South Asia Pacific regions, I think many people just migrated to seek a different new style of life and, you know, experience different culture, because it is very different to the Asian and the Korean culture. So I think there are many different reasons why Koreans, you know, immigrate overseas.
Right, and you mentioned a really important part, which is the culture. There's so many differences, and we're now seeing so many third generation of Korean immigrants. And having grown up in the States with some of them, I know many second gen Korean Americans who've never even stepped foot here in Korea before, and they're just so accustomed to the unique cultural backgrounds of the States. But a common trait among them is that they still don't want to forget their Korean roots or their Koreanness, because it's a big part of their cultural identity. And Cheska, I know you've also lived in the States and in New Zealand before. So why don't you explain how the Korean American or Korean New Zealander communities like?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. When I first moved to New Zealand, or when I first went to New Zealand, the Korean community haven't actively formed. So the interesting thing is, I think a lot of Korean communities, and I think you can tell me a little bit later, they formed around churches. Like church gatherings. So they formed little communities, and then of course they would congregate around like the Korean mart, where you get the food, right? Because the food is a big cultural tie. Now, just to give you a little bit of episode, it recently came out on a movie, but when I brought my lunch bag with the dried seaweed and the Korean style fried rice, everyone would kind of come around and be like, is that edible? Like, what is that black thing that you've got there? And now it's becoming like very trendy to eat cultural Korean food. So I remember those times when I had to sort of like hide my lunchbox or explain to them what it was. And now seeing how we're so proud of our cultural cuisine and, you know, becoming even trendy to wear like Korean or dress like Korean, to dance like Korean, I feel very, very blessed and almost grateful, to be honest.
I think food plays an amazing part in remembering your roots to a country. Now, Kyun, like you've been in Australia, you've grown up there. So what are Korean Australians like, and what's the community like there?
To be honest, it really depends on how you're raised by your parents, because I had a lot of friends who considered themselves as just pure Australians, not so much Koreans, because they were born and raised there, and they didn't have much knowledge of the Korean traditions, culture, or even the language itself. So sometimes it was a little difficult to really fully connect with them, even though we both look very Korean. But luckily, you know, my mom tried her best to constantly remind me that I was a Korean with an Australian citizenship, not an Australian who looked Korean. So she wanted to really, you know, put it in me saying, hey, you're Korean, just living in Australia. But it's fine that you think you're Australian, but deep inside you have the Korean blood and you have to keep it. So
you're waving the Korean flag.
Exactly. So I think that really helped me to solidify my kind of identity and learn to be really proud of my home country, despite experiencing a lot of racial discrimination and those kind of things. But, you know, thankfully now, just like what Cheska said, a lot of people around the world really appreciate the Korean culture, food, and everything, thanks to the Hallyu, the Korean wave. And now, like, if you say, oh, where are you from? If you say I'm from Korea, immediately they'll say two things: Squid Game, BTS. So you can make that immediate connection with any foreigner you
Yes.
meet. So I think
Right.
that's really helped us a lot.
And
as
another thing they
Koreans.
say is, I love Korea. Like, they actually say that.
Exactly.
Whenever you say I'm from Korea, oh, I love that country, or I love Korea. I never used to hear that before.
I know, the Hallyu wave has definitely made it a time for us Korean Americans or overseas Koreans out there to be really proud of where we're from. And I remember one thing you guys both mentioned, family and language. That's a really critical part because in many different like Korean communities overseas, they have Hangul-hak교, which is
They
where
do.
they teach overseas Koreans Korean. And that's a very essential part in remembering your roots because you need to know the language in order to communicate and better be connected. Now, we asked our viewers if they've ever participated in these overseas Korean community events. Now, here's what 3 of them had to share with us. Take a look at the screen to find out. The Power Ranger said, I've been to a K-pop club night in Vancouver, Canada, and it was like a true Korean dance night. Tasmia said, I went to a K-pop concert this year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Bangladesh and South Korea. Benny D97 said, for me, I haven't visited any Korean community events in the Philippines ever, but if I have an opportunity, I can attend one at a local KCC, which is a Korean cultural center here in the near future. I think this is really great. There's more Korean cultural centers abroad, and a lot of different overseas Korean communities are welcoming foreigners to even enjoy the Korean culture and food. Now, let's include a millennial overseas Korean in our talks to hear what he has to say about the growing community and their notable contributions. Let's hear what an actual Korean American living in Seattle thinks the main traits and latest interests of the overseas Korean community are. It's Enoch Che, who's actually moved to the States in his 30s and is therefore a first-generation Korean American. He's currently hosting a radio program in Washington for the Korean American community. He's also actively participated in many Korean American cultural events in the state. So it's great to have you on our show, Enoch.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. Hello.
All right, Enoch.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you the first question. In light of commemorating all Korean nationals overseas, we've decided to have you on our show. So could you tell us a bit more about when you first moved to the States and since then, whether you built a family there? Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Okay, I have an American in 2019. It's been 4 years already. Working as a producer in Radio Hangul, I met Korean American and got married in 2021. One of the cast members of my show introduced me to my wife, and I have a son who just turned 1.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, I hear you host a radio program for Korean Americans. Tell us the main content of your show and what your objective is. I hear you also use Korean as well as English. Why so?
Yes, my radio program starts at 2 o'clock every day as music talk program. It usually broadcasts Korean old songs from 70s and 80s. The main listeners of my programs, their age range 40 and up. Most of them are comfortable in Korean, so I speak in Korean during my show. I play a role in delivering news about Korea to listeners and share the Seattle news into Korean.
And, you know, you're a first-generation Korean, and now you have a son who's going to be a second generation. What do you think are some of the concerns or common interests that Korean Americans have these days? And how would you distinguish the key traits of Korean American based on their generation?
Okay, I think it depends on what language they use. That's my personal opinions. Not all Korean Americans speak English well. Only those who are born in here, immigrate to the U.S. as children, naturally learn English as their native language. If you immigrate a little later, no matter how long you are living in the United States, you will be comfortable speaking Korean and miss Korea. Those who are comfortable English and are well adapted American culture, they naturally get a job after graduating from the college. If not, I haven't seen them starting their own business. The second generation born in the U.S. learn Korean as a second language and try to keep their identity as a Korean American. they go deeper into American society, so they don't repeat the difficulties of their parents' generation.
Now, Enoch, remembering your traditional roots seems to be key, and that's why we're seeing so many Korean American communities hold different activities on traditional Korean holidays, or as I mentioned, Hangul-hak교. Like, we try to teach our kids, especially second and third generation kids, to learn more about the language and culture. Could you tell us a bit more about how the current Korean American community you're in is trying to preserve the Koreanness in your culture?
Okay, I think the language and culture represent our identity. Nowadays, Korean Americans are trying to promote Korean culture and songs and Korean food in various ways. The consulate generation in Seattle makes very effort to create Korean Culture Week every year, and to promote Korean culture incorporates with the local community organization. This year, 18 various cultural events were planned with the support of the Consulate General. They naturally introduce our cultures by hosting Korean traditional dances, music, Chuseok celebration, and concerts and sports and competition with Americans.
I see. Well, thank you so much, Enoch. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so today is World Korean Day.
Yes.
And as a final ending note, what should our generation remember or try to follow on this day?
You know, whatever we enjoy today has been sort of laid out by those before us. And what we do today, I think, is going to lay the foundation for those coming after us. And today, as we mentioned very briefly, I think every one of us can agree that we are enjoying the most blessed time as Koreans at the moment, thanks and owing to every Korean out there in the international countries doing their jobs at the moment. So I really want to thank everyone who's doing their parts in different parts of the world. And you know, I'm really proud, as Kim Gu would have once said, that he wanted our country to be the most beautiful and culturally powerful country. And I hope news generation take the responsibility forward as well.
We will, we will. Ki-hun?
I think World Korean Day is a good time for all of us, like what Jessica just talked about, to really think back to how far we have come as a nation. I mean, we used to be one of the most poorest countries, but now we're like one of the leading economies on the global stage. So I think it's safe to say that we should all be proud of being Koreans, whether or not we have a different passport or not, because we have that heritage and background, and just continue to live as Koreans as our country gradually becomes a global pivotal state.
You couldn't have said it better. I think World Korean Day is about the fact that whether you might be ethnically Korean, but you might feel like that because you're overseas, but at the end of the day, you are. And identity crisis is a big part of this issue. But hopefully the message that we can get across to you today is that you are Korean, be proud of it, and no need to, we've all been through that when we had to choose between rooting for Team Korea versus Team USA during sports competition.
Are you kidding? I have to pick between 3 countries.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, if you feel Korean, you are Korean. Nobody can tell you differently. And in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Park Ki-hun.
Always a pleasure.
And Jessica Dainong.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토 스팟.